On the day Chloe's brother Garrett heavy-handedly placed his massive hand on my shoulder and told me to grow up, act like a real man, and shoulder my responsibilities, I had already been doing exactly that for 3 whole weeks. He just didn't have a clue what a real man looked like yet. But he would. They all would. Garrett wasn't just talking either. He was a former SEC college football player, a guy who moved through life relying entirely on pure physical intimidation and a booming voice. He chose that exact moment, right in the middle of our annual company backyard barbecue, surrounded by the very employees who reported to me every single day, to lean his massive frame into mine. It was a calculated, pathetic power move, designed to alpha me in my own space, to humiliate me in front of my staff, and to make it look like he was handing a boy a lifeline. He thought he was putting me in my place. He had no idea I was just letting him play his part in a script I had already finished writing. My name is Jack Miller. I didn't go looking for the truth. The truth practically forced its way into my life. Let me back up to how it all unraveled. It was Friday, February 11th, inside our kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina. I came downstairs that morning at exactly 7:20 a.m. I started the coffee maker, listening to that familiar morning drip, and sat down at the island. Right there, plugged into the wall, was Chloe's old iPhone. She had claimed the night before that she just needed to leave it charging in the living room as a backup device. There was no particular reason I picked it up. Just one of those absent-minded, half-awake morning habits where your brain isn't fully online yet, so you reach for whatever is closest to your coffee mug. The screen lit up. No passcode required. Chloe thought she was being clever. She was using that old phone to forward encrypted messages from a hidden chat app, thinking she was leaving no trace on her daily device. What her desperate, cheating brain forgot was that I paid the bills for our premium family iCloud storage plan every single month. And overnight, while she slept peacefully upstairs, that cloud backup had silently, automatically, and fully restored every single byte of her hidden data right onto that old screen. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I just picked up a piece of plastic, and my entire life turned to ash in the span of 4 minutes. Welcome to Dad's ultimate payback. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere dark, cold, and meticulously calculated. Do me a quick favor before we dive deeper. Smash that like button, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this curtain falls. As I sat there, the messages began loading sequentially, a cascading waterfall of absolute betrayal. I read the first one, then the next. Then I completely stopped counting. These weren't just standard, cliché texts about an affair. This was an executive execution plan. For the past 11 months, I had been burying myself in work down in Atlanta, flying back and forth every single week, sacrificing my sleep and my sanity to get our company's new core branch off the ground. It was supposed to be the biggest milestone Brad and I had ever achieved as business partners at Bodex Design Group. I was the one living out of suitcases, building our collective future on the road, while Brad stayed back at the Charlotte home office, supposedly holding down the fort. But while I was sweat equity building a life for us, Brad and Chloe were in Denver and Savannah, building something else entirely. The messages detailed a ruthless, multi-layered blueprint. Brad and Chloe hadn't just been stealing moments in boutique hotels. They were actively plotting to systematically freeze me out of the Atlanta accounts, manipulate the board, and find legal loopholes to dilute my shares in Bodex Design Group until I was left with nothing. They used my forced absence as their ultimate golden opportunity, sleeping in my bed while actively trying to bankrupt my life. I sat at that kitchen island for exactly 1 hour and 10 minutes without moving a single muscle. My coffee went stone cold. I didn't care. I didn't even blink. I just stared at that screen, absorbing every single calculated lie, every mockery of my hard work, and every piece of my stolen life. At 8:30 a.m., the heavy silence shattered. I heard Chloe's alarm go off upstairs, her feet hitting the hardwood floor, and the shower water running. The familiar, sickening soundtrack of 4 years of mornings together. Here she comes, I thought. Don't move. Don't breathe differently. Don't you dare let her see it on your face. When she walked downstairs, she looked completely unhurried, soft, and entirely at ease. She was wearing the expensive silk blouse I had bought her for our last wedding anniversary. But as she turned toward the coffee maker, her hair shifted, exposing a gold pendant necklace nestled against her collarbone. I recognized it instantly from the digital receipts I had just read. It was a birthday gift from Brad, purchased with my company's money, hidden poorly beneath her hair. "Jack, you're still home," she smiled, pouring herself a cup. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" I looked into the eyes of the woman I had loved without reservation for 4 years, swallowed the glass-sharp agony in my throat, and forced a perfect smile. "Surprise me," I said. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. She just didn't know it yet. I want to be brutally honest about the days that followed that discovery, because people always think a man in my position immediately explodes. They expect screaming in the driveway at midnight, smashed plates, and clothes scattered across the front lawn. That is not what happened. What happened was much quieter, colder, and far worse. I gave myself exactly 15 minutes every single night. After Chloe fell asleep, I would step outside and sit in my truck, my 2021 Ford F-150 Super Crew, parked right there in my own driveway. Engine off, lights off. Just me in the pitch black, with a 15-minute timer set on my phone to feel everything I couldn't afford to feel inside that house. The blinding betrayal, the humiliation, the absolute grief. But during those quiet nights in the cabin of my truck, I discovered something else. I began checking the vehicle's synced GPS log. Chloe had been taking my truck on weekends, claiming she was driving to the upscale organic markets across town. The GPS data told a completely different story. Every single Saturday afternoon, my truck was parked for hours at a luxury high-rise penthouse in downtown Charlotte, a property I quickly verified was leased under Brad's corporate name. 15 minutes of suffocating pain, then the timer would buzz. I would wipe my face, step out of the truck, and walk back inside, because I had work to do. On the third day after the discovery, I made a call to Helen Spencer. In Charlotte, Helen isn't just a divorce attorney. She is a legal shark who carries the energy of a woman who has dissected every marital lie in existence and stopped being surprised decades ago. I sat across from her desk, laid out the printed chat logs, and waited. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer me a sympathetic look or a box of tissues. She just tapped her pen against a legal pad and delivered a cold, sharp ultimatum. Stop talking to her, stop reacting, and start documenting everything. But then Helen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses, and dropped a piece of information that chilled me to the bone. Chloe hadn't just been cheating. She had secretly retained a high-profile family law firm 2 months prior. She had been actively documenting my long, exhausted hours working in Atlanta, asking her lawyers how to structure an asset division claim based on me suffering a severe mental breakdown and incapacity. She wasn't just planning to leave me for Brad. She was actively trying to frame me as psychologically unstable so she could legally seize the entire Charlotte house, our savings, and strip me of my dignity. She thought she was setting a trap for a man standing blindly at a crossroads. She had no idea she was dealing with a man who had already crossed the line, signed the mental paperwork, and was quietly waiting for the perfect moment to let her feel the crash. While I was out on the pavement in Atlanta, sweating through double shifts, drinking terrible hotel lobby coffee, and building a brand new revenue stream from the ground up, Brad stayed comfortable in our main Charlotte office to manage operations. Or so he claimed. Armed with Helen's instructions, I began pulling our corporate accounting ledgers with the absolute, unhurried focus of a man who had nothing left to lose. What I found wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was a financial execution. Brad hadn't just been using the corporate card for expensive lunches or premium gas. Over the last 6 months, he had drafted, approved, and executed 3 fraudulent consulting contracts with a shell LLC registered under a fake name. The legal representative for that phantom company, Chloe. Together, they had systematically drained over $120,000 directly out of our joint expansion fund. I sat in my home office looking at the digital wire transfers, realizing my wife and my best friend were literally funding their affair and their future legal war against me with the money I was killing myself to earn. But the greed didn't stop there. As I dug deeper into the line item expenses, I uncovered 22 separate boutique hotel and luxury dining charges in Savannah, Georgia. Every single one of them had been filed by Brad under client entertainment and relationship building. We didn't have clients in Savannah. I cross-referenced the dates with my own travel logs. Every single charge fell perfectly on a weekend I was trapped in Atlanta. I systematically organized every receipt, every bank statement, and every matching GPS log into a meticulous, color-coded binder. I labeled it Business Expense Audit, which felt far more devastatingly clinical than calling it what it actually was. Evidence of 22 knives in my back. Then, I pulled our original 2017 operating partnership agreement, drafted by our founding attorney, Gerald, a man who deserves a steak dinner at minimum for his foresight. Deep within Section 14, subsection C, was a clause Gerald had insisted on including. It explicitly stated that if either partner was found to have utilized corporate assets, credit, or time for personal conduct constituting a material breach of fiduciary duty or professional ethics, the non-offending partner reserved the absolute right to trigger immediate dissolution. More importantly, it allowed the innocent partner to seize 100% of the intellectual property, active client contracts, and operational assets without buying out the offending party. The final piece of the trap required moving the pieces on the board. I scheduled private, off-site dinners with Jasmine, our brilliant senior project manager, and David, our lead designer. They were the backbone of Bodex Design Group, and their loyalty belonged to me, not Brad. When I quietly laid out my plans to launch a brand new entity and asked if they would jump ship, they both said yes before I could even finish the sentence. But then Jasmine lowered her voice and gave me one more weapon. She revealed that 2 months prior, Brad had explicitly altered project timelines on an Atlanta account, intentionally causing us to miss a critical government compliance deadline. During the subsequent emergency board meeting, Brad explicitly laid the entire failure at my door, trying to decimate my professional reputation with our largest corporate clients while I was out of the room. Jasmine had secretly recorded that entire board meeting on her phone to protect herself. She handed the audio file over to me. I added the digital file to my color-coded folder, closed the latch, and smiled into the quiet room. They thought they were playing checkers with a broken man. They didn't realize the Grandmaster had already cleared the board. The axe finally fell on March 2nd. It was a Sunday evening, and I was sitting in the living room watching the Carolina Panthers game, a ritual I had been looking forward to all week just to feel a shred of normalcy. Right in the middle of a crucial drive, Chloe walked into the room, stood directly between me and the screen, and picked up the remote. She shut the television off. Before I could even utter a word, she burst into tears, the kind of practiced, heavy sobbing meant to instantly disarm a man. "Jack, I made a mistake," she wept, her voice trembling. "A terrible mistake. 11 months ago, with Brad, it started, and I am so sorry, but you need to hear me out. I'm 3 months pregnant." But as she kept talking, the real, ugly truth spilled out. This wasn't an accidental slip-up. She crying confessed that Brad had convinced her to get pregnant intentionally. They knew North Carolina law has a strict presumption of paternity for children born during a marriage, meaning I would be legally bound to pay massive, long-term child support regardless of DNA. They were trying to force me to financially anchor their mistake for the next 18 years. I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fists. I just let the cold weight of her words settle in the room. "How long have you known?" I asked, keeping my voice entirely flat. She blinked, thrown off by my absolute lack of rage. "About 6 weeks," she whispered. 6 weeks. For 42 days, this woman had sat across from me at the dinner table, kissed my cheek goodnight, and stared straight into my eyes over FaceTime while I was exhausting myself in Atlanta, all while carrying another man's child and calculating my financial ruin. But the true depth of their malice came to light when Helen's team audited my corporate benefits package the following week. During those exact 6 weeks, Chloe and Brad had quietly logged into the company portal, forged my signature, and tripled my life insurance policy. They weren't just waiting for me to find out. They were actively preparing a massive financial safety net in case the sheer stress of the situation literally broke me. I looked at her, hid the absolute disgust burning in my chest, and said quietly, "I just need some time to process this." She cried harder, completely mistaking my icy calm for the first signs of submission and forgiveness. 4 days later, her entire family staged an unannounced invasion. My front door swung open and in walked Eleanor, my mother-in-law, Garrett, her linebacker brother, and Aunt Karen, who has never missed a family crisis in her life and had zero intention of starting now. They arranged themselves on my living room sofa like a self-appointed panel of high court judges. Aunt Karen immediately made herself at home, picking up my TV remote with one hand and using the other to dig into my box of Ritz crackers and organic hummus without asking. Eleanor smoothed her skirt, looked at me with a face full of forced pity, and slid a document across the coffee table. It was a modified post-nuptial agreement they had drafted themselves. "Jack, you are such a good man," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "This child is innocent. We expect you to sign this, committing to stay married for the next 5 years to protect the baby's development, and in exchange, we will personally ensure Chloe cuts ties with Brad." They sat there looking incredibly proud of themselves, thinking they had just cornered a desperate man and handed him a lifetime sentence. What none of them knew, not Eleanor with her folded hands, not Garrett with his puffed-out chest, and not Aunt Karen with cracker dust on her fingers, was that I had already spent my morning at Helen Spencer's office. The formal unilateral divorce petition had already been finalized, stamped, and filed with the courthouse hours before they even stepped onto my porch. Thursday, March 19th, became the day the ground opened up beneath them. At exactly 9 a.m., a courier delivered a certified legal package from the court and Helen's office to Brad's home and our corporate headquarters simultaneously. I didn't call him, and I didn't give him the dignity of a face-to-face confrontation. I simply let the paperwork do the talking. My phone lit up 5 times within an hour, with Brad's name flashing across the screen. I didn't answer once. Then came his desperate text. "Jack, come on, man. We can talk about this. Don't blow up everything we built over this." I stared at the message, flipped my phone face down, and continued eating my lunch. What Brad didn't realize until he tried to log into his computer was that the legal filing had triggered an emergency asset freeze injunction on all of Bodex Design Group's operational bank accounts due to the documented corporate fraud. He couldn't withdraw a single dollar to pay our subcontractors, settle outstanding vendor invoices, or even cover the upcoming payroll. By noon, his entire world was in a state of absolute financial paralysis, staring down the barrel of immediate personal bankruptcy and total ruin. The next phase of the execution took place on the neutral ground of a quiet coffee shop on Colorado Boulevard. Over the span of 2 weeks, I systematically scheduled private, individual meetings with members of Chloe's family, starting with Eleanor and then Garrett. I didn't yell, and I didn't engage in emotional debates. When Eleanor sat down, looking anxious but still holding onto her matriarchal posture, I simply slid the color-coded binder across the table. Inside were the indisputable bank records, the hotel receipts from Savannah, and the timeline of Chloe's betrayal. She read in absolute silence for 4 minutes before her face completely drained of color. But the real masterpiece was the folder I handed to Garrett. I had included a heavily detailed addendum specifically for him, undeniable proof that Chloe had funneled $30,000 of my stolen company funds to pay off Garrett's secret, illicit sports gambling debts. Garrett's jaw locked, and his tough guy linebacker bravado dissolved into pure terror. He sat there staring at the ledger, realizing that if he uttered a single word in Chloe's defense, I would hand that file directly to the authorities and have him indicted as an active co-conspirator in corporate grand larceny. He quietly closed the folder and nodded in absolute submission. The final loose end was Aunt Karen. I had absolutely no intention of buying a 3rd cup of coffee for a woman who treated my home like a free buffet, so I handled her with a cold, efficient 6-minute phone call. I laid out the facts of Chloe's affair, the corporate theft, and the impending divorce with clinical precision. Karen gasped right on cue, already formulating how she was going to spin this gossip to the rest of the extended family. But before she could hang up and start dialing, I delivered one final, quiet warning. "Oh, and Aunt Karen," I said, my voice smooth and calm. "Just so you know, the smart voice-activated remote control in my living room has an integrated security camera. It captured a very clear recording of you digging through my leather wallet on the side table while I was in the kitchen during your little family intervention." The line went dead silent. The sudden, suffocating realization that I held enough leverage to completely destroy her social standing in the community turned her instantly. Karen didn't say a single word of protest. Instead, she became my most disciplined, terrifyingly efficient weapon, dismantling Chloe's carefully fabricated narrative from the inside out before the sun could even mount of guth. Out of the ashes of betrayal, Miller Creative Group was born. There was no grand, desperate marketing campaign needed. Within 48 hours of our official launch, the 6 largest, most lucrative clients from Bodex Design Group voluntarily transferred their entire accounts over to my new firm. They didn't care about a corporate name or Brad's smooth-talking presentations. They cared about the man who actually hit the deadlines, answered the 2 a.m. emergency calls, and delivered the work. With Jasmine managing operations flawlessly, and David leading our creative direction, our new ecosystem stabilized almost instantly. But the true, poetic victory came 3 weeks later. Miller Creative Group was officially awarded a multi-million-dollar state government contract down in Atlanta, the exact same contract Brad had spent 2 years declaring completely impossible for us to secure. While I was expanding our new empire into Georgia, Brad was left sitting alone in an empty office, holding nothing but a hollow, worthless brand name and a mounting stack of back tax penalties that he could no longer afford to bury. As my world expanded, theirs shriveled into a permanent, self-inflicted prison sentence. With no corporate funds left to bleed, and the court freezing their assets, Brad and Chloe were forced to rent a cramped, outdated 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town to raise their son, Sean. The toxic, electric thrill of their secret affair vanished the exact moment the secrecy did. Stripped of luxury boutique hotels, expensive dinners, and stolen afternoons paid for by my hard work, they were left with nothing but the bleak reality of each other. Every single morning at that cramped kitchen table, they sat across from one another in suffocating silence, paralyzed by absolute paranoia. They both knew exactly what the other person was capable of. The ultimate twist of fate occurred when Brad accidentally intercepted an encrypted messaging thread on Chloe's current phone. As it turned out, the moment Brad's financial empire collapsed, Chloe began quietly courting a wealthy corporate executive from out of state. The sickening cycle of betrayal had started all over again, only this time, there was no Jack Miller around to blindly fund their deceit or cushion their fall. On Friday evening, I stood out on the balcony of my new downtown penthouse, listening to the gentle hiss of a prime ribeye steak searing perfectly on my Traeger grill. I poured myself a neat glass of top-shelf bourbon, breathing in the crisp, unburdened air of absolute freedom. My phone buzzed on the railing. It was Eleanor. The call lasted 4 minutes. Her voice was tired, stripped of its usual suburban arrogance, as she offered a quiet, genuine apology for trying to force me into a life of misery. I accepted her words gracefully, wished her well, but left no door open for a return. I hung up and raised my glass to the skyline, celebrating a final, beautiful irony. That morning, I had officially closed the deal to buy back the exact suburban house Chloe and I used to share. After Chloe defaulted on the mortgage, the bank moved to foreclose, and I purchased the property at a public auction for less than half its original market value. I didn't buy it to live there. I bought it to gut the master bedroom and convert the entire structure into Miller Creative Group's newest branch office. I refused to let my life be defined by their destruction. I got quiet. I kept moving, and I took back everything that was mine. If you enjoyed this journey of calculated justice and ultimate resilience, do me one quick favor. Smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Dad's Ultimate Payback. We have many more real, raw, and high-stakes family stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single chapter. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next one.